Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Reier on YouTube channel. Be sure to give it a like and a subscribe. Smash those buttons. We're going to be bringing it to you all season here on Talkin Tide. Travis Reier, Chase Goodbread with the Tuscaloosa news. Looking ahead to fall camp, Travis, Alabama getting underway this week with practice. Players have reported. Fall camp schedule is out. Media days in the books. The season's upon us.
It's here for the most part. I mean, as far as camp, for me, that's really when it started because you and I, especially, we'd be out there for the entirety of camp in some form or fashion. So it's changed a little bit. I see, by the way, where Florida State is closing off all media coverage to practices.
Really?
Like one viewing period. I think it's August the 5th. Mike Norvell's going to allow for the Seminoles, of course, Alabama season opening opponent in Tallahassee. One brief media viewing, and that's it. Gus Malzahn putting in the wishbone or something? I mean, what's going on?
That's awesome. That'd be fun. I hope. I wish. I'd love to see it. It'd be a lot of fun to see the bone rebirth somewhere.
The Gus bone. Yeah, I mean, what he does anyway is a variation of the triple option. It just does it in a different way. But
what do these viewing periods tell us anyway, Travis? I mean, you remember what it was like. You can glean a little bit here and there, but there's nothing to be game plan. There's nothing to be gleaned game plan wise, I don't think, or anything like. You know what I mean? All they let and Alabama's viewing periods for fall camp are there's certainly a lot more than one, but it's a smattering. I want to say, I don't know, roughly half a dozen practices are going to have a media viewing period.
Is that slender? Is that slender compared to a year ago? I can't recall. It seemed like there was a pretty good bit a year ago.
I think there might have been a few more last fall. Don't hold me to that because I don't have the number and certainly can't remember exactly. My memory gets a little foggier, Travis, every year, of course. But suffice it to say, media availability is well constrained. Put it that way.
There you go. All right. Well, that's interesting. But nothing says I'm feeling the heat like shutting down media viewing after you've allowed it in previous years, I think, if you're Mike Norvell. So who knows, right? Who knows what we might see? That was going to be the case. I mean, if you're Kane Womack, the Alabama defensive coordinator, you're going to go into that opener with Gus on the other side, head on a swivel, kind of expecting any and everything in terms of eye candy and reverses. I mean, hell, we saw Gus dial up what was it? A throwback to the kicker from the holder in Tuscaloosa. I think it was 2018 or something like that. And I mean, Gus is going to be fully in his bag. I don't think anyone has any question about that.
Alabama getting started, Travis. Why don't we start on the offensive side of the ball to just kind of preview things as we enter fall camp? That's where most of the turnover is. That's where I think between the two sides, that's where the least experience is. They've got some experience on the outside for sure with Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard coming back as returning starters. A couple of those offensive linemen have been around a while. Jam Miller's been around a while, but new faces here and there too. Obviously, it's basically a new wide receiver room from wide receiver 3 to the end of the line is pretty much new, right? And of course, first and foremost, a new starting quarterback.
No doubt about that. You talked about the receivers to start with, and maybe at each position, we could offer up a guy that you're maybe rooting for. I know we're not supposed to do that, but I know at wide receiver, I'm rooting for Jalen Hale after missing last season with that injury and then coming back and, trying to work back in there in the spring. This was a guy with so much potential. Kind of looked like a young Devontae Smith during his true freshman season at times a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pulling for Jalen Hale, but you said it from a depth perspective. There's a Rico Scott that there's, I think, high hopes for there at receiver. Lazier Brooks coming in as a true freshman could be one of those slot guys. Just a a quick game, explosive option in addition to what he can do in the deeper and the intermediate range. They've got a nice mix too, man, in terms of measurables. They got a bigger guy in Isaiah Horton. They got a dynamic playmaker in Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, kind of in that between guy. Then you got a guy down the depth chart, at least starting out, in Derek Meadows, just towering option there at the wide receiver position. Interesting storylines with Jalen Mbakwe making the move from off defense to offense. Cole Adams coming back off an injury. He was ascending, it felt like, in that rotation at the time of his injury last season, Chase. So a lot to consider, maybe not so much in the top 2 or even 3 at wide receiver, but certainly when you go, as you said, kind of 4 through 6.
I'll give you a guy who's easy to root for on the offensive side of the ball. To me, is Wilkin Formby.
Yeah.
Local guy from Tuscaloosa who's coming back again at the right tackle position. He's not been able to get his arms around that job yet in his career, and this is the year he's got to do it. It's pretty wide open for him. Obviously, they got a couple of very promising freshmen at the offensive tackle position. Elias Islanen is a guy who can work out there if necessary, but Formby's the program needs Formby to solidify himself at right tackle as much as Formby needs to do it for himself, right?
Yeah, I've kind of had the same sentiment in the past, that watching this guy develop, even at the high school level at Northridge, the work ethic has never been in question. He is just continually, maybe not in leaps and bounds since his high school days, but on an annual basis, you saw incremental improvement from Wilkin Formby. And you're right, this is where it needs to happen for him. And we've talked so much in the past about those true freshman types that have come in, whether it's Cam Robinson, whether it's Jonah Williams, going back to Andre Smith back in the day a little bit. There's been more guys that have been second, third, maybe even fourth year guys as offensive linemen before they really hit in that starting lineup. I think about a guy like Austin Shepard. He was that sort of guy, going back to the mid-teens, I guess you could say, of the current century. So, yeah, I agree. Wilkin Formby, a guy you can root for. And there are some X factors in that offensive line. Ola Salinan, he's a guy that they've cross-trained between guard and tackle. So, I think we go into this thinking Cam Dewberry might be in pretty good shape, the Texas A&M transfer at one of those guard spots. But I think they've helped themselves not only in perhaps finding a starter on that offensive line via the transfer portal, but if nothing else, they've created more competition up front. And then you got the young guys. I mean, Michael Carroll, what's reasonable to expect to him? The mammoth true freshman. Jackson Lloyd probably a little bit further down the line at offensive tackle. But as you said, with right tackle, and then if you lose a tackle at some point, how does that work out for you too from a depth perspective?
Yeah, they bring in Cam Dewberry from Texas A&M out of the portal. He's lost a bunch of weight, Travis, which I think he needed to do, especially in this Ryan Grubb offense. And so the competition with him and Gino Vandemark at the guard position is going to be one to watch for sure. Jaden Roberts back with obviously quite a bit of experience, and then of course you got Caden Proctor sitting at that left tackle spot for what will probably be his last year with the Crimson Tide. There are some massive projections on Proctor draft wise. I don't think if he duplicates the season he had last year for Alabama, he'll get drafted, but he won't be a top 10 kind of guy. So I think he's got to bring his game up a little bit to meet some of the hype in terms of the 2026 NFL draft. But as you noted on a couple of other guys, the improvement on Proctor has been steady, right? Pretty much a disaster as a freshman in 2023, much better, but not completely consistent in 24. And then here's a junior in 2025. It's all in front of him.
Yeah, and his first couple of years, he's played through some stuff too. So whereas I wouldn't say I've gotten after him consistently here on the show, or even most recently in talking about where he's at in terms of his weight, is that necessarily ideal for what they would like him to be in terms of taking that next big step? He has shown you that he can play through some things. Obviously, the end of last season, he was dealing with something because he had to have the situation corrected, and that cost him being able to really go in spring drills. So give him credit for that. Again, he is a guy, as you said, positional value. If he does take that next step, very easy to envision him as that top 10 pick. If he doesn't, because of positional value and upside that he still has, I think he could still be a first round pick. Where it becomes interesting is kind of in that JC Latham, Evan Neal era, or that
Right.
situation with Caden Proctor, because I think we're seeing with both those guys rough starts to their NFL career, still very early, especially with JC. It looks like Evans going inside with the Giants from the tackle position. So he still got a lot to prove, though, no doubt about it, with Caden Proctor.
Tight end position we have not touched on. Obviously, the Crimson Tide was in a real jam at that position, really throughout spring practice, but especially at the end of spring, because they lost. They went into the spring down a couple, and then as spring moved on, they lost a couple more. So I think Jay Lindsey was the only healthy scholarship tight end they had at the end of the spring. It sounds like those guys, from what I understand, are pretty much going to be ready to go when practice starts. Maybe some limitations early in camp on a couple of them, one or two, but it's going to be one to watch too. We know Ryan Grubb likes to go 12 personnel a good bit. Josh Cuevas, who's one of those tight ends who's coming back from an injury, he's going to be counted on heavily. What do you make of that position?
Yeah, plenty of dudes, right? After not only the transfer portal, but bringing in some more young tight ends with the most recent recruiting class. You bring in Brody Dalton, the transfer from Troy. You go to the portal for a Big 12 option as well. I can kind of envision that duo in terms of how they fit and complement each other, how Alabama and other programs, other offenses like the one at Alabama, incorporate sort of the inline tight end and then the hip type of guy, the off the ball guy. Cuevas and Lewis, I could see that, but you don't go to the portal for a senior option and a guy like Brody Dalton if you're not planning on really making use of that kind of guy. So those three would make a lot of sense for me going into the season. But yeah, I mean, Marshall Pritchett coming in, Caleb Edwards coming in. Caleb Edwards is, I think he's already like 6'5", 6'6", 260 pounds. So, these aren't, this isn't Harrison Jones coming in at 6'4", 210 or something at the tight end position. It's crazy, how these guys are coming in at that size. And Lindsey, as you said, I think he's got the potential too.
Ty Simpson. Let's touch on the quarterback situation, Travis. 3 scholarship quarterbacks for the fall. Simpson comes in as the presumed starter. He was the best performer in the spring, and it's essentially his job. I think that's fair to say. I mean, obviously, fall camp, there's going to be competition everywhere, quarterback included, but all indications are that it's Simpson's job to lose. And, speaking of guys that are easy to root for, here's a guy that's been through 4 offensive coordinators as a quarterback. And has stuck around to wait his turn.
And we saw some of that in the Nick Saban era, but it was still always the Alabama offense in the Nick Saban era. So even though the coordinators changed, the offense really didn't change. But when you go from the Alabama offense to the Kalen DeBoer offense, which obviously is a lot of Ryan Grubb, he has made a wholehearted change from at least one offense to another offense. And who knows if there's going to be much of a change with Grubb now in that spot. But I'll say this, man. I was thinking about this today, and you tell me, in terms of importance at his position, his respective position, and the potential for a drop off from him to the next guy, where would you have Ty Simpson on this team if you thought about others, again, positions, understanding the importance of the quarterback position?
Right.
But you thought about offensive tackle from those first couple of guys that we're anticipating there to a third guy, or, the third corner or the third safety, or, the third or fourth wide receiver, tight end, kind of that way. I'd have Ty Simpson myself, Chase, way up there. And that's not because I don't think Keelan Russell isn't going to be great. I think he has that potential, but at least going into your season opener against a Power 5 opponent on the road, I'd have Ty Simpson up there pretty high myself.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. I think when you look at the most valuable guys on a football team, and by that I mean who can you least afford to lose, there are two factors. One is positional value, and there's no position more valuable than the quarterback.
Right.
And two, where are you at on the second team at that position, right? Because if it's a huge drop off, then the starter is all the more valuable for it. And so I think, yeah, you're right. Ty Simpson checks both of those boxes. One, it's the most important position on the field. And two, albeit Keelan Russell is a very promising youngster, you don't want to put the shoulders of you don't want to put the offense on the shoulders of a true freshman, especially when you're coming off 4 L's like this Alabama team is, and expectations are going to be for improvement, especially when you got just a second-year coach at the helm, all that stuff. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think, and we say that not knowing what Ty Simpson's going to look like for 4 quarters in a big game.
That designation is subject to change, but going into the season, I would feel okay with that. Tim Green checking in here live on the show chat, and we hope you'll do the same live on a Tuesday night, is Talkin Tide. Tim Green says Ty Simpson equals Jacob Coker. I don't know if I've seen enough of Ty Simpson yet to make that type of comparison. I could see why you would, though. I think the skill sets, Chase, are probably going to be similar. You hope that Ty Simpson shows, and I think he will, that sort of competitive nature that Jacob Coker exhibited throughout that 2015 season. I think as much as anything, Coker's came from as he continued to build confidence, right? I mean, it maybe wasn't as much of a thing for him early in that season, but even in that loss to Ole Miss, it seemed to really springboard him from a confidence standpoint. And maybe even more importantly, the people around him, their confidence grew in Jake Coker. And that's what you want to see with Ty Simpson.
No doubt. I think when I think about Jake Coker, what I think about is a dominant running game and a quarterback who had a big arm, who was staring at 8-man boxes, and he was going to help the team the most by chucking it over the top.
Ridley, Ardarius Stewart, OJ Howard, playmakers. So, and I think Ty's got that.
Coker was a perfect quarterback in some respects for that offense, specifically because that running game was so effective at opening things up downfield. Whereas what you expect from the Grubb offense is different, right? You don't expect this Grubb offense to run for 200, 250 a game. And,
Jam Miller ain't getting 395 carries like number 2 did.
No, and by that I mean I think Ty Simpson's probably got a little bit of a tougher challenge than Coker had, right?
Yeah. I think there's going to be more put on Ty Simpson, but I think similar to 2015, he's going to have enough people around him, to really help him out. And I think Tim goes a little bit further here and says undefeated starter Ty Simpson if the O-line is improved. That 2015 offensive line, they could run block your ass, but I don't recall it being exceptionally gifted in the way of pass protection. So that's where Henry was so important to that team. Not only Jake Coker, but they were so proficient running the football that it really helped them in pass pro too, because I don't go across that offensive line in 2015 and think, oh yeah, there's 2 or 3 just dominant pass pro guys.
I just wrote a little something this morning on what's going on with the running back position in the SEC at large. 10 years, I went back and looked at this. I think I might have thrown something about it on that X platform too. 2015, Travis, we're talking about 2015. Your preseason all SEC backs were Leonard Fournette and Nick Chubb were your first teamers. Derrick Henry was a second teamer, right? And you had talents like Alex Collins sitting on third team.
Yeah.
Kenyon Drake was a third teamer.
Yeah.
You look at what just came out in 2025 for preseason all SEC backs, and it's like, where's the star power here, right?
And in the words of Michael Jordan, Derrick Henry took that personal.
Yes, he did.
What a year for Derrick Henry, and just carrying that offense in a lot of ways. But I don't think they finished the way they do that year if Coker in the passing game didn't come along. That really, you talk about it really ascending at the perfect time with Ridley and Stewart, and how OJ Howard just had that incredible championship game out in Glendale against the Clemson Tigers. So what are we thinking about that running back position, though? That kind of leaves that, I believe. We've talked quarterbacks, we've talked receivers, we've talked offensive line. We're both in agreement that this will not be a 395 carry offense for Jam Miller, or probably all the running backs combined. It won't be. But what's the thinking going into this camp as far as Miller and maybe how this could break down with the rest of those guys?
Yeah, I think the battle for that number 2 role is going to be the most interesting thing about it. I mean, Jam Miller is going to be the guy or half the guy, right? And what are they going to get out of whoever emerges as the backup? Got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder if I'm Richard Young, Travis, being that they brought in Traylon Washington out of the transfer portal.
And if I'm Daniel Hill, for that matter, or one of those second-year backs that, like you said, that they've brought in. But I don't know. You tell me. I think still it has to do with, and even an offense where we're not anticipating 400 or 500 carries for backs or 400 carries for backs. You just can't have enough of those guys, legitimate guys. And I think maybe this is a response to what Kalen experienced at Washington a couple of years ago, right? When he was pretty much down to a back when they got into the 12th, 13th, 14th game of the season.
No doubt. You got to have a lot of depth at that spot. You lose them. Running backs get hurt all the time. By the time Thanksgiving rolls around, if your number one back is feeling good, you're fortunate. I don't care who you are. So depth is huge. Daniel Hill was beat up last year a little bit too. And I think we might have seen him a little bit more in game action had that not been the case. So you're right. I think he's got a chance to work into the mix too. You got Kevin Riley, the local kid from Tuscaloosa, who returned as well. So interesting mix of backs there for sure. And
man, I just want situational success. Okay, just convert 3rd and short, 4th and short, and red zone. In this offense, because I think it can kind of take care of itself from there. I don't need a Derrick Henry in this offense. Never would complain about having a Derrick Henry. That's not to say I would, but situationally, when I think about this offense, that's what I think first and foremost, Chase. Short yardage, goal line, move the sticks, hit the paint.
Right. Josh Jacobs gave you all that, guy like that. So no question about it. They've got to get it. They've got to be able to get it done in short yardage. They got to be able to get it done when they sniff the goal line. You get that close, it's harder to throw the ball. It's a lot harder to throw the ball when you get, red zone's a big area. Not so much from the 18, but when you're sitting on the 6. It's a lot harder to throw it around.
And I still think you will have the luxury of a quarterback that can run it in those situations or carry it in those situations. Not maybe to the extent of Jalen Milroe, but I sense a competitive nature from Ty Simpson that kind of like Jake, the comparison that Tim made earlier, when Alabama needed it in some short yardage, and whether it was by design or extending a play, Jake Coker became a very reliable guy. He had a huge run against Clemson and Glendale late in that game. It wasn't for a touchdown, but I think Alabama had a 3rd and short from inside the 10. They could still get a first down inside the 10, and he went and got it. And that really went a long way in putting that game away. I can see Ty Simpson giving the offense some of that too.
He's an athletic guy. He can tuck it and go and get you a first down. Obviously, he's not as explosive and doesn't have Milroe's raw speed. He's not going to be a threat to score from anywhere on the field. But
he doesn't have Coker's size either. You know,
no, he doesn't.
That's one thing I'd be concerned about with that as well.
I do expect defenses, though, Travis, at least in September, early on. I think you're going to see a lot of man coverage. I don't think you're going to see a ton of spies. That's what, they're going to make Ty Simpson show them that he can hurt them, tucking it before they start playing more zone and spying.
You got a man up too on the outside.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I could see, though. I could see maybe a safety over the top of 2, but then everybody else, to your point, manned up.
Yeah.
Right? Jeremy Bernard, manned up. Isaiah Horton, manned up. And that'll work too. Because if they play that softer coverage, they play that off coverage because of Ryan Williams, you got to be able to run the football, right? I mean, you got to be able to make defenses pay. That's where the onus goes more to your offensive line and your backs.
Spent a bunch of time on that offense, Travis. Let's go ahead and flip it over to the defensive side of the ball for the last few minutes before we close things out. Plenty to get to there as well. That's where the experience is, the higher expectations, in my opinion, on that side of the ball, and should be. And not that they have everything in place, but there's a lot of guys that I expect to be high quality, good football players on this defense. Don't know necessarily that there's there's not a guy who I'd classify as a flat out superstar coming back. Deontay Lawson, coming off that knee injury, you want to see how he looks early in the season and how ready he is to be his old self. But it's hard. It's also hard to find a position where they're short, right?
It is, and a lot of that has to do with the good fortune they had. Some of it, not so good fortune that turned into good fortune. A guy like Keon Sabb, with his injury, that all but assured that he would be back in college football. As we know, these days, that doesn't necessarily mean a player is going to return to their most recent team, but to get him back that way. But sure, I mean, when you bring back LT Overton and Tim Keenan to start with up front, and James Smith, who's played a good bit of football and was playing his best football at the end of the 2024 season, that's a great place to start. And then, as you said, at those linebacker spots, Deontay, Nakai Hill-Green coming in from Colorado. We talked about this on the last show. I can't imagine him going to Alabama if he thought he was going to be the third guy. So, obviously, if Deontay is good to go for Florida State, he'll be the guy. He'll be out there first in all likelihood to go along with Justin Jefferson. But given the severity of that injury and the time frame in which it occurred, I still think we're going to see Nakai Hill-Green a lot in all likelihood early on in the season. I think Quay Rusal may be the most interesting guy on this defense. There's a couple of spots where really want to see an uptick of production in this defense. And I go to Wolf for some of that, with Quay Rusal emerging and kind of being that front of the line guy now at that position. And I'd also go to Husky, that fifth defensive back spot, where you've got a Deshaun Jones who's had a year in the system now. You've got a Red Morgan as a sophomore. Dre Kirkpatrick Jr., I guess, is in that mix. Those are a couple of the spots and a handful of the players that I'm really interested to see if they can fortify this defense and really help take it to the next level.
You also wonder if Dijon Lee, the hot shot corner, 6'4", who had such a strong spring, really impressed the coaching staff.
Yeah,
If that
6'3",
guy
6'4".
turns out to be too good to keep off the field on defense, well, now are you cross training Xavier Brown at that Husky spot, right, or some other kind of? Because at that point, you got to get your best 5 out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how they go about it. We know Nick Saban was a big proponent of that. Although Nick would start guys as freshmen out at, say, that star position and then go from there. Guys like Minka Fitzpatrick come to mind. That's where he got his start in his Alabama career. So it's a good potential problem, I guess you could call it, with Damani Jackson and Xavier Brown at the corner spots. I mean, Cam Calhoun can play coming in from Utah. Zay Mincy at the safety position. So Ivan Taylor coming in as Chuck McDonald coming in as highly touted true freshman. Mo Linquist and that defensive secondary, man. A lot of guys. It'll be interesting to see how they feed all those mouths back there, and in large part because they are exclusively a 5-man secondary, as we've talked about in the past. They don't go to a 6 DB in Kane Womack's defense. So you need to be in that first 5 because being the 6th guy doesn't really get you much in this defense.
Well, you're right. You're dead on personnel wise. They just don't play any dime. However, and I remember you and I discussing this last fall a couple times on the podcast. Kane Womack will play a lot of guys. He'll run the 2s out there in crunch, and for snaps that matter, certainly more than Nick Saban and his.
Do you think that was a year 1 thing? Or do you think that's just what we're going to get?
Yeah.
I mean, was that kind of still figuring out my guys, seeing what I got? Or do you think
question.
That's going to be what we see moving forward? I mean, you saw not only on the field a lot of different guys, you saw friends and family on the sideline helping coach the defense. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, it was a big tent, wasn't it? I'll say this: the defensive, obviously, DLs rotate regardless, right? I mean, Saban's defense has rotated a bunch of DLs. Those big guys need a blow, and so you'll certainly see the DL rotations continue. The question is, are they going to play the?
You don't see corners rolling in and out around that level of football that much.
No.
And hey, look. If you're confident enough in your guys, and maybe in this era of college football, it's something we're going to see more of because you have to keep all of these guys as engaged as you possibly can from a roster management perspective. Hey, maybe Kane Womack's way ahead of the curve because you don't see it a lot,
No, you don't. That's for sure. So that'll be something to watch, no doubt about it. I've said and will continue to say that this defense is going to need somebody to break out as a pass rusher, and doesn't have to be an edge guy. You mentioned Quay Rousseau. He could be that guy potentially coming off the edge and being the guy.
They need depth at that Wolf position to step forward, even if Quay is that guy at the top. They've got a couple of 3 guys they need. Is Jamarian Latham, one of those guys, kind of a tweener between end and that position there at the Wolf?
If I had to handicap people on the front in terms of the best chance to be a breakout pass rusher, I think I would put Rousseau at the top. I don't think I'd put Latham at 2. I think after Rousseau, I'm going inside, maybe with a James Smith or maybe even a Jeremiah Beeman who had a big spring.
Well, Overton, obviously.
Overton. For sure.
But Yanze Pierre, Justin Hill, Noah Carter, right?
Yeah.
Need some of these guys to move forward here off the edge there.
And the reason is those guys command double teams. Offensive coordinators look at those guys and they say, okay, this guy can't beat us, right? we got to chip with the backs. We got to whatever it takes. Help from the tight end. You need that pass rusher who offensive coordinators don't want to get beat by, because that's what's going to set up your one-on-ones everywhere else.
And to start the year, that guy in the front seven that the help's going to get sent to, in my opinion, is Overton. I mean, he's got the most disruptiveness on tape. He has got the tape that speaks to a potential game wrecker, especially going into this season. So if I'm Florida State and I'm getting ready for Alabama, if I'm sending help to anyone to start that game, it's going to be LT Overton. And that's where Quay Rusal has got to make people pay. You know, that's where James Smith has got to make people pay. And our guy Tim Green checking in here in the comments, Chase says he watched Bama, Georgia again today, and he says Keon Sabb from the safety position and Red Morgan had some bust in that almost comeback for the Dogs, but Morgan got it back at the end. That's what I want to see from Keon Sabb and a guy like Red Morgan and maybe some other guys at that Husky, is dependability as much as anything. Keon Sabb will put your lights out. I have no question about that. And in run support, he will come up and take care of business. But can his eyes deceive him at times? I think they can. And so that'll be another thing that, you know, early on in the season, teams will look to work on.
And the way Womack runs the defense, eyes in the secondary are bigger than ever, right? Because back there, you know, they're looking to jump routes. That's what they're looking to do back there. And
takeaways.
Occasionally you're going to eat one, you know, when you do too much of that.
I feel like that's where Bray Hubbard, though, can be a bit of a safety net for you back there, too. Right place, right time, athleticism to pay it off when he is at the right place at the right time. I'm excited about that safety tandem, man, looking at those two guys. But yeah, Husky's going to be very interesting.
All right, that is going to wrap it up, I think, Travis, for our fall camp preview. We'll be back with some more frequency, right, going forward here through the rest of the fall.
Yeah. We may do a practice watch along or two here on the channel. We get some of that video from UA, from some practices to start fall camp. We may jump on and kind of just talk through it a little bit with you live here. We do it live here on the channel. So we encourage you to check in and chime in right here on Reier on YouTube.
Blanket, we'll do it live.
Yeah. Yeah. We do it Bill O'Reilly style here.
Lots of fun.
You know? Yeah.
All right. Once again, smash that like button and the subscribe button for the Reier on YouTube channel. For Travis Reier, I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. We'll be talking to you real soon again right here on Talkin Tide.